If we can just linger on the Machiavellians, it's a study of power and power dynamics, like you mentioned, looking at the actual reality of the machinery of power. From everything you've seen now in government, but also in companies, what are some interesting things you can sort of continue to say about the dynamics of power, the jostling for power that happens inside these institutions?
Yeah, so a lot of it, we already talked about this a bit with the universities, which is you can apply a Machiavellian style lens to it's why I posed the question to you that I did, which is, okay, who runs the university? The trustees, the administration, the students, or the faculty? And the true answer is some combination of the three, or of the four, plus the donors, by the way, plus the government, plus the press, et cetera, right? And so there's a mechanical interpretation of that. I mean, companies operate under the exact same, set of questions. Who runs a company? The CEO, but like the CEO runs the company basically up to the day that either the shareholders or the management team revolt. If the shareholders revolt, it's very hard for the CEO to stay in the seat. If the management team revolts, it's very hard for the CEO to stay in the seat. By the way, if the employees revolt, it's also hard to stay in the seat. By the way, if the New York Times comes at you, it's also very hard to stay in the seat. If the Senate comes at you, it's very hard to stay in the seat. So, like a reductionist version of this that is a good shorthand is who can get who fired. So who has more power? The newspaper columnist who makes $200,000 a year, or the CEO who makes $200 million a year. And it's like, well, I know for sure that the columnist can get the CEO fired. I've seen that happen before. I have yet to see a CEO get a columnist fired.
Did anyone ever get fired from the Bill Ackman assault on journalism? So Bill like really showed the bullshit that happens in journalism.
No, because what happens is they wear it with I would say to their credit, they wear it as a badge of honor, and then to their shame, they wear it as a badge of honor, right? Which is, if they're doing the right thing, then they are justifiably priding themselves for standing up under pressure. But it also means that they can't respond to legitimate criticism, and they're obviously terrible at that now. As I recall, he went straight to the CEO of I think Axel Springer, that owns Insider, and I happen to know the CEO, and I think he's quite a good CEO. But well, it's a good example. Is the CEO of Axel Springer run his own company, right? Well, there's a fascinating thing playing out right now. Not to dwell on these fires, but it's a case. You see, the pressure reveals things, right? And so, if you've been watching what's happened with the LA Times recently, so this guy, biotech entrepreneur, buys the LA Times 8 years ago. It is just like the most radical social revolutionary thing you can possibly imagine. It endorses every crazy left-wing radical you can imagine. It endorses Karen Bass. It endorses Gavin Newsom. It's just like a litany of all the people who are currently burning the city to the ground. It's just like endorsed every single bad person every step of the way. He's owned it the entire time. He put his foot down for the first time, I think, put his foot down right before the November election and said, we're going to get out of this thing where we just always endorse a Democrat. And we said, we're not endorsing for the presidency. And the paper flipped out, right? It's like our billionaire backer I don't know what he spends, but he must be burning $50 or $100 million a year out of his pocket to keep this thing running. He paid $500 million for it, which is amazing. Back when people still thought these things were businesses. And then he's probably burned another $500 million over the last decade, keeping it running. And he burns probably another $50 or $100 million a year to do this. And the journalists at the LA Times hate him with the fury of 1,000 suns. They just absolutely freaking despise him. And they have been attacking him. And, the ones that can get jobs elsewhere quit and do it. And the rest just stay and say the worst, most horrible things about him. And they want to constantly run these stories attacking him. And so he has had this reaction that a lot of people in LA are having right now to this fire and to this just incredibly vivid collapse of leadership. And all these people that his paper had endorsed are just disasters. And he's on this tour. He's basically he's decided to be the boy who says the emperor has no clothes, but he's doing it to his own newspaper. Very smart guy. He's on a press tour and he's basically saying, yeah, we did all that and we endorsed all these people and it was a huge mistake and we're going to completely change. And his paper is, in a complete internal revolt. But I go through it, which is, okay, now we have a very interesting question, which is who runs the LA Times? Because for the last 8 years, it hasn't been him. It's been the reporters. Now, for the first time, the owner is showing up saying, oh, no, I'm actually in charge. And the reporters are saying, no, you're not. And it is freaking on. And so again, if the Machiavellian's mindset on this is okay, how is power actually exercised here? Can a guy who's even super rich and super powerful, who even owns his own newspaper, can he stand up to a full-scale assault, not only by his own reporters, but by every other journalism outlet who also now thinks he's the Antichrist?
And he is trying to exercise power by speaking out publicly. And so that's the game of power there.
And firing people. And you know,
Firing
he has
people, yeah.
removed people and he has set new rules. I mean, he is now, I think he's saying that he's now at long last actually exercising prerogatives of an owner of a business, which is to decide on the policies and staffing of the business. There are certain other owners of these publications that are doing similar things right now. He's the one I don't know, so he's the one I can talk about. But there are others that are going through the same thing right now. And I think it's a really interesting open question. Like, you know, in a fight between the employees and the employer, like it's not crystal clear that the employer wins that one.
And just to stay on journalism for a second, we mentioned Bill Ackman. I just want to say, put him in the category we mentioned before of a really courageous person. I don't think I've ever seen anybody so fearless in going after, you know, in following what he believes in publicly. That's courage. That several things he's done publicly has been really inspiring. Just being courageous.
What do you think is like the most impressive example?
Where he went after journalists whose whole incentive is to like, I mean, it's like sticking kicking the beehive or whatever. Yeah. You know what's gonna follow. Yeah. And to do that, I mean, that's why it's difficult to challenge journalistic organizations. Because they're going to, you know, there's just so many mechanisms they use, including like writing articles and get cited by Wikipedia, and then drive the narrative, and then they can get you fired, all this kind of stuff. Bill Ackman, like a bad MFer, just tweets these essays and just goes after them legally and also in the public eye, and just, I don't know. That was truly inspiring. There's not many people like that out in public. And hopefully that inspires not just me, but many others to be courageous themselves.
Did you know of him before he started doing this in public?
I knew of Neri, his wife. She's this brilliant researcher and scientist. And so I admire her, look up to her. I think she's amazing.
Well, the reason I ask if you knew about Bill is because a lot of people had not heard of him before, especially like before October 7th and before some of the campaigns he's been running since in public, but and with Harvard and so forth. But he was very well known in the investment world before that. So he was a famous, he was a so-called activist investor for, you know, very, very successful and very widely respected for probably 30 years before now. And I bring that up because it turns out they weren't, for the most part, battles that happen in kind of full public view. They weren't national stories, but in the business and investing world, the activist investor is it's like in the movie Taken. It's a very specific set of skills.
Yeah.
On how to like really take control of situations and how to wreck the people who you're going up against. And there's been controversy over the years on this topic, and there's too much detail to go into, but the defense of activist investing, which I think is valid, is, you know, these are the guys who basically go in and take stakes in companies that are being poorly managed or under optimized. And then generally what that means is, at least the theory is, that means the existing management has become entrenched and lazy, mediocre, you know, whatever, not, you know, responding to the needs of the shareholders, often not responding to the customers. And the activists basically go in with a minority position, and then they rally support among other investors who are not activists. And then they basically show up and they force change. But they are the aggressive version of this. And I've been involved in companies that have been on the receiving end of these, where it is amazing how much somebody like that can exert pressure on situations, even when they don't have formal control. So it would be another chess piece on the mechanical board of kind of how power gets exercised. And basically what happens is the effective analysts, a large amount of the time, they end up taking over control of companies, even though they never own more than like 5% of the stock. And so anyway, so it turns out with Bill's, it's such a fascinating case because he has that like complete skill set.
Yeah.
And he has now decided to bring it to bear in areas that are not just companies. And two interesting things for that. One is, you know, some of these places, you know, and some of these battles are still ongoing, but number one, like a lot of people who run universities or newspapers are not used to being up against somebody like this. And by the way, also now with infinitely deep pockets and lots of experience in courtrooms and all the things that kind of go with that. But the other is, through example, he is teaching a lot of the rest of us the activist playbook, like in real time. And so the Liam Neeson skill set is getting more broadly diffused just by being able to watch and learn from him. So I think he's having I would put him up there with Elon in terms of somebody who's really affecting how all this is playing out.
But even skill set aside, just courage. And
yes, including, by the way, courage to go outside of his own zone.
Yeah.
Right. Because like he hasn't, I'll give you an example. Like my firm, venture capital firm, we have LPs. There are things that I feel like I can't do or say because I feel like I would be bringing embarrassment or other consequences to our LPs. he has investors also where he worries about that. And so a couple of things. One is his willingness to go out a bit and risk his relationship with his own investors. But I will tell you the other thing, which is his investors, I know this for a fact, his investors have been remarkably supportive of him doing that. Because as it turns out, a lot of them actually agree with him. And so it's the same thing he does in his activism campaigns. He is able to be the tip of the spear on something that actually a lot more people agree with.
Yeah, it turns out if you have truth behind you, it helps.
And just again, how I started is a lot of people are just fed up.